You are standing on the edge of the Gulf of Mexico on the morning of September 8, 1900. Galveston, Texas is the Wall Street of the South, a glittering, wealthy island city where the elite of America come to play. The air is thick, humid and heavy, smelling of salt spray and expensive cigars, as the morning sun glistens off the grand Victorian mansions that line the wide palm-fringed boulevards. You don't know it yet, but by midnight, the ground you are standing on will be the site of the deadliest day in American history. The city feels invincible, a thriving port of nearly 40,000 people who believe they have tamed the sea. There is no sea wall here, only a gentle slope of sand that has always been enough to keep the Gulf at bay. As you walk past the ornate iron fences and the lacework wooden balconies, you hear the rhythmic sound of children playing in the surf and the distant clatter of horse-drawn carriages. The atmosphere is holiday-like, but beneath the surface the atmosphere is reaching a boiling point, and the barometer is beginning a terrifying silent plunge. By 9 a.m., the tide is doing something strange. It isn't going out. Instead, the water is creeping up the sand, inching toward the city streets with an eerie, persistent calm. You watch as people gather on the beach, laughing and splashing in the rising water, treating the unusual tide as a curiosity rather than a threat. They don't see the massive slate-grey swells building far out on the horizon, or the way the sky is turning a bruised, sickly shade of copper and green. The wind begins to pick up by noon, no longer a breeze but a persistent morning howl that rattles the heavy glass windows of the grand hotels. The rain starts shortly after, not in drops but in horizontal sheets that sting your skin like needles of ice. You see the first signs of concern on the faces of the sailors at the wharf as the water begins to flood the lower streets, swirling around the wheels of the wagons with a dark, oily persistence. The Wall Street of the South is beginning to feel very, very small against the vastness of the Atlantic. By 3 p.m., the wind has become a solid wall of pressure, screaming through the narrow alleys and tearing the slate shingles off the roofs like playing cards. You struggle to walk as the air fills with flying debris, pieces of picket fences, shattered glass, and the heavy branches of oleander trees. The sound is no longer just wind. It is a deep, primal roar that vibrates in your chest, a sound that Isaac Cline, the local weatherman, realizes too late is the voice of a monster that cannot be stopped. You watch as the grand Victorian mansions, symbols of wealth and permanence, begin to shudder under the relentless battering of the waves. The water is no longer just flooding the streets. It is rising with a terrifying speed, swallowing the first floors of the homes south of Broadway. People who were laughing hours ago are now scrambling into their attics, clutching their children and their Bibles, listening as the foundations of their world begin to groan and snap under the weight of the sea. At 6 p.m., the great wave finally arrives. A 15-foot wall of water, driven by 145-mile-per-hour winds, surges across the island with the force of 1,000 battering rams. In a single horrific moment, the entire southern half of the city is simply erased. You see houses being lifted off their foundations, acting as massive wooden projectiles that smash into the buildings behind them, creating a relentless chain reaction of destruction that turns the city into a churning whirlpool of timber and death. The darkness falls, but there are no lights in Galveston tonight, only the blinding flashes of lightning that reveal a landscape from a nightmare. You are huddled in the upper floor of a brick building, feeling the entire structure vibrate as it is struck by the floating remains of a neighbor's house. The sound is a demonic symphony of shrieking wind, the thundering crash of falling masonry, and the high-pitched snap of ancient redwood beams. You can hear the screams of those caught in the water, but they are instantly swallowed by the roar of the hurricane. The wall of debris begins to form, a 3-story high mountain of shattered houses, grand pianos, and splintered furniture that is being pushed across the island by the surge. For some, this wall becomes a shield, a temporary barrier against the waves, but for thousands of others, it is a crushing machine that grinds everything in its path to splinters. You watch as the water rises until it is licking at the very ceiling of your room, the cold, salt-heavy waves smelling of mud, and the bitter scent of a world being destroyed. By midnight, the peak of the storm is past, but the silence that follows is even more terrifying than the roar. The wind dies down to a ghostly whisper, and the water begins to recede, leaving behind a city that is unrecognizable. You climb down from your refuge into a world that has been turned into a wasteland of grey mud and jagged wood. The grand boulevards are gone, replaced by a jagged desert of ruins where the only landmarks are the lonely standing chimneys of homes that no longer exist. As the sun rises on September 9th, the true scale of the horror is revealed in the pale, cold light of dawn. Galveston is a graveyard. 6,000 souls, some say as many as 12,000, have been lost in a single night, their bodies tangled in the wreckage that covers the island from shore to shore. You walk through the mud, your breath hitching as you realize that every mound of timber you pass was once a home filled with life, laughter, and dreams. The air is filled with a thick, cloying fog, and the sound of survivors wandering through the ruins like ghosts, calling out names that will never be answered. You see a man sitting on a pile of bricks that used to be his business, staring blankly at the horizon where the Gulf of Mexico now sits, calm and blue as if nothing had happened. The wealth of the Wall Street of the South has been vaporized, replaced by a collective, bone-deep trauma that will define this island for the next century. The recovery is a grim, soul-crushing task that defies human endurance, because the ground is too saturated for graves, and the sea keeps washing the dead back onto the shore. The authorities are forced to make a horrific decision. You watch as massive funeral pyres are built across the island, the black smoke of burning redwood and human remains filling the sky for weeks. The smell, a thick, greasy mixture of salt and ash, becomes a permanent resident of your lungs, a reminder of the price paid by those who dared to defy the sea. You stand on the ruins of the wharf, looking at the twisted iron of the shipping cranes and the shattered hulls of the great steamships. Galveston was supposed to be the greatest city in the West, but the storm has handed that title to Houston, a city safely tucked away on the mainland. The dream of the island empire has been drowned, and the survivors are left to decide if they will abandon the sand or stay and fight a battle they now know they can never truly win. But the spirit of the survivors is a force even the hurricane couldn't kill. You watch as the remaining citizens begin the impossible task of raising the city. Using massive jacks and millions of tons of sand dredged from the bay, they begin to lift every single building, every church, and every house 17 feet into the air. It is a feat of engineering born from pure defiant spite against the ocean, a declaration that Galveston will not be erased. A massive concrete seawall is built, a jagged grey shield that now stands between the people and the Gulf. You walk along the top of this new barrier, looking down at the sand where the great wave once surged. The city is different now. The Victorian lacework is still there, but it feels older, more fragile, like a survivor who has seen too much and can never truly forget the sound of the wind. The 1900 hurricane remains the deadliest natural disaster in the history of the United States, a title it holds with a somber, undisputed weight. It changed the way America looked at its coasts, forcing a realization that the beauty of the sea carries a lethal, unpredictable price. You look at the photographs of the ruins, the grainy black and white images of the wall of debris, and you realize that you are looking at the end of an era of innocence. Today, you can still walk the streets of Galveston and see the high watermarks on the sides of the old buildings, a silent testimony to the night the ocean came for the city. The island is beautiful again, but there is a quiet, underlying tension in the air every time a storm builds in the Gulf. The survivors are all gone now, but their stories are etched into the very bricks of the seawall, a legacy of fire, water, and an indestructible will to remain. You take one last look at the sunset over the Gulf, the same water that once rose to swallow the world. The waves are gentle now, lapping at the shore with a deceptive, rhythmic calm that belies the fury they once held. You realize that history isn't just about dates and numbers, it's about the 60 seconds of shaking and the 3 days of burning that changed the DNA of a people forever. The San Francisco you knew, the Galveston of your dreams, they are all ghosts now, buried under the weight of the days. The earth and the sea decided to remind us of our place. As the mist rolls in once again, you walk away from the shore, a witness to the deadliest day in American history, carrying the memory of the city that refused to stay under the waves. Galveston was lost, then found, and finally reborn, a testament to the fact that while the storm may take everything, it can never take the heart of a city that chooses to rise.